So, memory, what is it? How does it function? And why did I put the lyrics to a bad song from the Cats soundtrack on the screen? Good questions, all. To answer your last question first, it's because it's funny to me. And isn't that what's important? Making me laugh? Yes, it is. So, your memory has three main jobs. Okay, your memory needs to encode, store, and be retrieved. Those are the three jobs of memory: encoding, storage, retrieval. That's the basic job of memory. Encoding is the process through which we put it into our brain. Storage is the process through which we keep it in our brain. And then, of course, retrieval is the process through which we get it back out again. Because if we can't get the stuff out, then it's not a memory and it's doing us no good. So, the first job is to encode. Now, what exactly does that mean? It means transforming the sensory information that we are absorbing all the time into our nervous system to be processed by our brain so that it can be understood and then put into storage for later. Now, the trick to encoding is the more effort that goes into encoding, the better the storage and the retrieval processes are going to be. Now, we also have to understand how our brain encodes. And there's a couple of different types of encoding. The first is acoustic encoding. For some people, they can hear something and remember it. Those are very, very lucky people. They have strong acoustic encoding. I sometimes have a strong acoustic encoding, but more often than not, I have a stronger visual encoding. And for that, for those people, it includes seeing something in order to be able to remember it. Okay, I have a very, very strong visual memory, a visual encoding process. If I want to remember something, I have to write it down. Otherwise, it tends to get forgotten. And if you've ever been in that situation where your parent comes into your room and tells you something while you're doing something, and you're just kind of like, yeah, I heard you. If you're not an acoustic encoder and you need to write it down, then you probably should have written it down, because my bet is that you didn't remember, you forgot, and that information disappeared. And then a few hours later, your parents came back and were like, what happened to I told you to, and you're like, I don't remember that. Okay. So the type of encoding that happens to each of us is very personal to who we are. Some people need to have things highly organized. Some people need to just hear it one time and they will remember it. Okay. Another type of encoding is semantic encoding, and this is the process through which we process the information in our brain and we give it some meaning in order to help us to remember it. For example, when you were in, I don't even know when you would go back to learn this, 4th grade, 5th grade, and you were learning the order of operations for math class, and you had to learn the parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. You had to learn that process. The please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay, if you learned that, that is a semantic encoding process to help you to remember. If you had to memorize the 5 Great Lakes, you might have remembered Holmes, Homes, or Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, the 5 Great Lakes. That is a semantic encoding process. Your brain has to kind of come up with another way of being able to remember that thing. If you remember anything using some kind of mnemonic device, that is a semantic encoding process. Now, encoding something is great. It puts it into your brain. Now, what happens after that? Well, that's another job of your brain. Now, you'll also see that I'm trying to do two different types of encoding right here. Okay, I'm talking to you about the encoding process, and I'm also trying to show you a visual about what encoding truly is. Because I know that at the end of this unit, there's going to be a test, and there's going to be a question that's going to be about the job of encoding. And if you are a visual encoder, you have the words written right here. You should be writing some of this information down so that your brain can see it again. But we also have people who are visual encoders looking at this picture going, oh, so encoding is like filling up your brain with information. Yeah, that's basically what you're doing. You're transforming all of the visual, auditory, all the sensory data about this, and you're putting it into your brain and you're filling it up. For those of you who are acoustic encoders, you're listening to me and you're like, oh, got it. Acoustic encoding is transforming that information, and so on and so forth. For those of you who are really good at semantic encoding, I don't have a really good semantic encoding process to help you to remember this. But maybe you're looking at AVS and you're thinking, oh, I can come up with a phrase that I'll remember. Aunt Viv says that encoding is cool. I don't know. You're coming up with something and you're like, oh, acoustic, visual, and semantic. We got this. Okay. The fact is that everybody's memory basically functions the same way. And if you can understand better how your memory actually functions, you can give your brain a chance at being able to remember things well into the future. Okay. The second job of your brain and your memory is to store that information. Now, we'll talk about sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. But basically, your long-term memory is endless. It is endless. It is ever expanding. There is no point with which you will run out of long-term memory. One of the wonders of the human brain. Okay. It isn't as if you get to a point where you're like, well, and my brain is full, so I can't learn anything new. Okay. You'll never have that situation where you remember that summer where I read the encyclopedia and I forgot how to drive? That's not a thing. Okay. Your brain has endless storage in long-term memory, and those long-term memories will never go away. To your dying day, the only thing that makes those things go away is you're dead. Okay? That's the only thing that ends your memory. Now, can we forget things? Yeah, but here's the thing. They're still there, and they can still get brought back out of the depths of having forgotten it. Okay? It's still in there somewhere. It just hasn't been thought of in so long. It might take a little thing to get you into the, oh my God, I remember this now. But it's still in there. Okay. So after you've stored it for a set amount of time and you need that information again, you have to be able to retrieve it. Okay. Now, the process through which we obtain that information out of storage can be difficult. And there are some memories that are locked deep in the filing cabinets of our brain. But if we can build a particular method through which we can retrieve those memories, we can retrieve anything at any time and be able to do it very quickly and easily. Now, there are memory championships every single year. They have basically a memory contest, and they find the person who has the best retrieval system. Now, these people don't have superhuman memory. They have superhuman retrieval systems that you too can learn as well. Now, many of you are probably sitting there thinking to yourself, why the hell didn't we go over this on the first day? And why are we just learning about this now that I'm a senior? I could have been memorizing things. What the hell? Well, there's a very explicit reason that A, I didn't go over it on the first day, and B, we don't teach explicitly how to memorize things. And that is, we don't need to memorize things. I have this computer in my pocket that memorizes everything that I could possibly ever need, and I can just look it up at any time I want. So I don't need to memorize things. When I was in school, I was forced to memorize things. Multiplication tables. Yeah, from 1 to 12, you're going to memorize what the multiplication tables are. Why? I have a calculator. Yeah, but you're not always going to have a calculator. Ha ha! I showed them. Yeah, I will have a calculator. Okay. When I was in 10th grade, I was taught SOHCAHTOA. Okay. Sine, cosine, and tangent. Do I know what any of those things do? Hell no. But I memorized that sine is, which is opposite over adjacent. And then cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. No, it's not opposite over adjacent. It is opposite over hypotenuse. Then cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent. What does that mean? I have no idea. But I memorized that, and that's useless to me. Okay? It's 100% useless to me. There's no use in doing that. Okay? So why didn't I teach you how to memorize everything right from the start? Because that's useless. Unless you're actually using the information and doing something with it, why memorize it? Okay? In the memory championships, they're memorizing things to get a little trophy that says, I'm really good at memorizing things. And I'll actually put 2 videos into the Google stream that are that show a memory championship and what these people are actually doing, which is astonishing when you think about it. And then another video from a guy who learned one of these tricks to being able to retrieve the information out of their brain, and has memorized the first, I want to say, 100 digits of pi. Okay, 3.14159. He's memorized the first, I think it's 100 digits of pi, and can retrieve it, and does retrieve it at the end of the video. It's actually really, really interesting because the way that they're doing this is through what we call context-dependent memory effect. Now, what does that exactly mean? It's basically a fancy word for, or a fancy phrase for, you remember things better when you're back where you put it into your brain the first time. Okay. For example, normally we would be doing all of this in the classroom. Okay. So let's say we did all of the learning in the classroom, and then we take you out of the classroom and we put you into another place. We take you up to the library and we give you the test in the library. You're going to remember less because of the context-dependent memory effect. It's the same reason they take people who have crimes happen to them back to the scene of the crime. Do you remember anything else about the person who beat you or the person who robbed you or whatever? Okay? Putting them back into that context helps to revive memories so that you can retrieve them that much easier. Well, these memory champions build their own context for the context-dependent memory effect, and they can memorize almost anything. One of the latest memory champions, he had to memorize the face value and the suit of a deck of shuffled playing cards. Okay, so take a deck of 52 playing cards, shuffle them up, and then memorize the order in which you see them in a freshly shuffled deck. I could do maybe the first card, and we'll talk about why in just a second. Okay, so these people build context into their retrieval system so that they can put things into context and remember them very, very easily. One of the worldwide all-time memory champions was actually a Russian. His initials were SS. They don't know what his actual name was. But he was able to memorize nonsense syllables years after he had first learned them. It's pretty crazy. Memory itself, however, is very, very yes, never eat soggy waffles is another one. It's not why this generation is dumb. There's other reasons. Yeah, and why should you memorize that? I have a calculator. I don't need to memorize that. Anyway, so there are three main stages to our memory, and we're going to talk about each one at length. So just understand that we're going to talk about what each one of these is, what each one of them does, and how we can maybe benefit ourselves from understanding that. Okay, so the first one is sensory memory. Your sensory memory is at most about 30 seconds long. Okay, it is about 30 seconds. Whatever is paid attention to in your sensory memory goes into your short-term memory, which is about 5 minutes long. Okay, and is of finite size. There is a definite size to your short-term memory. That, after you pay attention to stuff in your short-term memory enough, it gets stored into your long-term memory, which again is not only limitless, but is also forever. You will always have that as part of your long-term memory. My SOHCAHTOA, I learned, I don't know what it means, but I remember Mr. Oshiro telling us the story about how last night he stubbed his toe and his wife told him to go SOHCAHTOA. Yep. I remember the stupid story, not the purpose of what it does. And before any of you math nerds start going, well, this is exactly what the SOHCAHTOA does, I don't actually care because I'm an adult and it doesn't matter. It's never come up in my life. Ever. Well, actually, you could figure out the angle. I don't care. It doesn't matter. All right? Let's move on. So, sensory memory. So as your body is sending sensory information to your brain, there has to be a little place for that information to go. And I'm going to use this analogy for your sensory memory. I want you to think of your sensory memory as like a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot, that orange bucket that we've all seen on the side of the road. Okay, that orange bucket is of finite size. But your sensory information is a fire hose aimed right at the opening of the bucket. And your job is to find inside the flood of water that is going into that bucket. Your job is to pick out little tiny diamonds. Okay, so your brain is sifting through this gush of water, trying to find the diamonds that you're trying to pay attention to. Okay, and those diamonds are the things that you are supposed to be listening to and paying attention to. Okay, but it's buried in a flood of information. What does it smell like right now? What does it taste like right now? What does it feel like right now? None of that information is actually necessary, but it's still flooding your brain. So your brain just wants to forget all of that, but it's trying to find the things that you're supposed to be paying attention to while your brain is going through a huge amount of information. Okay. Now, those diamonds that you're picking out go into your short-term memory because you paid attention to them. Okay. But if you miss one of the diamonds, it's just gone, and you have forgotten it like it never happened. And there are a couple of different memories in your sensory memory that we have strengths in and weaknesses in. For example, iconic memory is visual memory. Okay, iconic, visual. Echoic, echo, sound. Okay, eidectic. There isn't really a good way of remembering it, so just remember it as photographic memory, being able to remember everything as it is. And there are people out there who have a strong eidectic memory. It's exceedingly rare, though. Most people don't have any kind of photographic memory all the time, but there are a very rare number of people who do. Okay, so your sensory memory is the first place where the information gets put that is going to go into storage. And you have to pick it out in order to be able to get the information that you're supposed to. Okay, if you don't pay attention to it, it's just gone. It overflows the bucket and it's gone. And there are lots of diamonds that we have missed throughout our entire lives, and we will continue to miss them throughout our entire lives. It's not that we're bad people. It's just how our memory functions, because it's constantly being bombarded by information, and we can't just get it all. We don't have that kind of capacity. Okay, so once it has gotten through your sensory memory and gotten picked out, here's another diamond, put it right down there. It goes to our short-term memory. Now, our short-term memory is about 5 minutes long and is finite, meaning there is a limit to the amount of information that your short-term memory can hold. And that is the magic number 7. So your short-term memory is about 7 items big. Now, what exactly does that mean? It means after 7 items, your ability to be able to remember it begins to become more and more shaky. It's just not going to happen all that well or all that easily. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to try and do a demonstration of that magical number 7. And we're going to look at how our brains do actually have a limited space in our short-term memory. Okay, so again, short-term memory comes out of your sensory memory. Those are the little diamonds that get plucked to the side. And if you don't pay attention to them, if you just keep plucking things out and you're just not paying attention to your short-term memory, those diamonds dissolve. Okay, so in order for those diamonds, the things that you're supposed to be remembering, to actually survive, you have to pay attention to them. So how can this help us? Well, I want you to think about how you study and how you learn things. Okay, we've already talked about learning. We talked about that in our last unit. How do we get something out of that sensory memory stream and then pay attention to it? Well, you need to do it in small chunks, and you need to break it up over a period of time. Sitting down and trying to memorize 50 things right off the bat is not a good way of remembering those 50 things. You're gonna forget most of those 50 things. Instead, what you should be doing is taking out a small number of things out of your sensory memory, putting them into your short-term memory, and then pay attention to them in your short-term memory. Because once you've paid attention to it enough, it will enter into your long-term memory, where it will be stored there forever. Now, how many things should you pay attention to at a time? No more than 7. And I want you to think about all the places that the 7, the magical number 7, shows up, plus or minus 2. Okay, so for example, without the area code, how long is your phone number?
Seven.
It's 7 digits. Okay, I wonder why they did that, so that you would remember it. How many seas did the ancient mariners sail? 7. How many dwarves? 7. How many wonders of the ancient world? Yeah, 7. Okay. Why? How many numbers are in a social security number?
6.
No.
Nine.
There's 9 numbers in a social security number. But like I said, it's 7 plus or minus 2. Why didn't they come up with a 23-digit number? They'd have a lot more numbers, right? Because are we eventually going to run out of social security numbers if there's only 9 numbers? I mean, that's, let's see, 1, 10s, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. So all we need to do is have 999 100 million Americans with a social security number, and we've run out of social security numbers. Is that going to happen? Yeah, that's going to happen. There's 350 million Americans right now. What are the chances that we start doubling up? Probably pretty good. Okay, so why didn't they have 23 numbers? Because they wanted to give you a chance of remembering them. Okay. Exactly. Yeah, we're starting to see those babies. Anyway, so basically, if they want you to remember it, it's 7 items or fewer. Okay, and this was actually brought up yesterday when we were talking about this, and I actually think that there's something to this, that maybe you were really successful in school in early elementary or maybe even into late elementary, but then suddenly you weren't very good at it. Well, it was probably because your elementary school teachers broke things down into smaller chunks. And then when you got to middle school or even into high school, we stopped doing that for you. And you didn't know to do that for yourself. And so what you used to be able to do, you can't do anymore. So obviously it's because you're dumb. No, it's because you're not remembering that you don't know that your short-term memory can't do more than 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 things. Yeah, student ID numbers, there's only 6 numbers because we want you to be able to remember it. Okay? So the magical number 7, we're going to take a look at that tomorrow. We're going to do a little demonstration. We're going to try to see exactly how big our short-term memory is. All right? But that's going to be tomorrow, and that's a big maybe right now. I'm working on trying to figure out a way of making that happen. We'll work on it. Anyway, the other thing that you need to think about and remember is that you can actually expand the size of your short-term memory by chunking the information into one piece. For example, the area code. Okay, the area code is 3 numbers. Well, 3 numbers plus 7 numbers is 10 numbers, and that's too many numbers to remember. But who thinks of their area code as 3 separate numbers? Nobody does. Everybody remembers it as a chunk. 661. Oh yeah, 661. That's the area code. Okay, or if you're from around where I'm living, the 909. Okay, 909. That's just one piece now. 661 is one number plus your phone number, and you got your phone number. You don't have to remember too much. You're not giving me 17 numbers to remember. You're giving me an area code, which is one chunk, and then a phone number. Okay, so let's do a little test of your short-term memory. Okay, I'm going to put up on here a series of numbers. I want you to try to remember those numbers as best as you possibly can. Okay. Now, if you're going to sit there and try to read each number as a separate number, you're going to get to a point where you're just not going to get through the number anymore. Okay. The best thing that I can suggest to you is to picture the entire number in your head and then repeat the number back. Okay. Don't read each number 4, 3, 4, 2. Oh, crap, it's gone. Because the number is only going to be up there for a fraction of a second. It's going to be up there and then it's going to disappear. And you have to try to remember that. So we're working on your short-term memory. All right. Then after that, I want you to type in the number that you remember there in the chat window. So here is the first number. Okay. What was the number? 2937. Okay. Easy enough. How about okay, 78541. And we're already starting to get a couple of mistakes. It happens. You don't have a bad memory. It happens. Okay. Let's try this one. Okay, 821374. Okay, now we're at 6 numbers now. Let's do a challenge. Here we go. Ready? Okay, 3820961. All right. How about this one? Got 1829. Okay. A lot of good guesses and a lot of the first couple of numbers you're getting, but it's I think it was 1829 4664 or something like that. I don't even remember what it was. Okay, what about this one? Yeah. Okay. I have overloaded your short-term memory and made it so that you can't remember much beyond the first couple of digits. After that, it's just kind of a jumble of numbers and maybe it just keeps going. Okay. So what about this one? This one's a real challenge. It's 16 numbers. Okay. Well, in this case, you can actually break it down into 4 individual chunks, and it's far easier to remember. Okay, so if you look at the 4 chunks, it's 1992, 1993, 1994, and 1995. Now we've got 4 chunks of information, and it's really easy to remember.
Wouldn't it be easier if it was like we were shown it longer?
No, because even if I show it to you for a half a second, that is your sensory memory picking that information out and putting it into your short-term memory. If I put it up there for longer, now I'm just testing how well you can pick out lots of information and put it into your short-term memory and not have to pay attention to it because it's still going to be there. Okay. If I want you to really test your short-term memory and how big it is, we have to move your sensory memory directly into your short-term memory. Okay. So if we know that our short-term memory is only 7 items big, then maybe after you've learned 7 items, you stop and you go do something else for a little while. Okay. So studying shouldn't be a cram session of several hours. It should be, I'm going to study these 7 things. and then I'm going to go do something else. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to study 7 more things. And I'm going to go and do something else. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to study 7 more things. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to go do something else. Breaking it up into groupings of 7 will help with recall in the future. It's just how our brains and how our memories actually function. Okay? Another thing that we have to keep in mind is what we call the primacy and the recency effect. Now, the primacy-recency effect applies to trying to remember long lists of things. We best remember the information at the beginning of the list and at the end of the list. We call the beginning of the list the primacy effect, and we call the end of the list the recency effect. And the main gist of why we remember the first things is because that's the thing that we saw first and we were paying attention to. That's the stuff that got put into that short-term memory basket. We remember the end of the list because those are the last couple of things that you remember that you put into that basket before looking at it again. Okay, so if I give you a shopping list, what are you going to remember off of that shopping list? Well, the first couple of things on the list and the last couple of things on the list. You won't remember the middle of that list. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put up a shopping list, and I want for you to look at the shopping list, and I want for you to tell me how many items are on the shopping list. Okay, it's only going to be up there for a couple of seconds. So again, it's going to be a flash onto your sensory memory. What do you remember it being there? I remember there was how many items are on this list. All right, don't put down what's on the list. Tell me how many items are on the list. Okay. Now put that back into your head. How many things are on the list? Okay, 8 or 9, 7. Okay. There are 8 items on the list. Now, what are some of the items that you remember? Ham. Okay, so for the most part, people are remembering the cheese and the eggs, the first 2 items on the list. And a couple of you are getting milk, which is, I believe, was the 3rd item on the list, or maybe that was the second one with eggs in number 3. Some of you are remembering the jam, which is right there at the end of the list. Some of you are remembering the standout items of shampoo and ketchup, because you probably were stuck on that for a second going, why is shampoo on this list? I thought this was a grocery list. Everybody knows you can get that for cheaper at Target. Why would you go to the grocery store for that? And then ketchup. What on earth is ketchup? It's the generic ketchup. Ketchup is a brand. Catsup is the generic. Okay? It's just ketchup. But it's like saying facial tissues instead of Kleenex, or adhesive bandage instead of Band-Aid. Band-Aid is a brand. Ketchup is technically a brand. Yeah. Oh. So we remember the beginning of lists, we remember the end of lists, we tend to forget the middle part of that list. So many of you did not remember the shampoo, the bread, and the ketchup. Okay, they're the catsup. Okay, many of you forgot that, which is fine. It just shows how our memories actually function. So if we keep the list small and we pay attention to it, it will get into our long-term memory far, far easier. Now, speaking of long-term memory, so there's a couple of different ways that our long-term memory kind of gets organized. We have our semantic memories. We have our episodic memories. We remember our declarative memory, and we have procedural memory. And we'll talk about each one of these separately. So the first one that we're going to talk about is semantic memory. And semantic memory is basically all of the knowledge that you have about language. So grammar, vocabulary, the meanings of words, all of that stuff is stored in our semantic memory. If you know how to speak multiple languages, then you have multiple languages in your semantic memory. The semantic memory is also where we put our facts, where we retain our information that we know. If you remember who wrote Moby Dick, okay? A lot of you are probably thinking, there's a book called Moby Dick. Yes, it's a book called Moby Dick. Who wrote it? I didn't even know it was a book. It was Herman Melville, okay? That is a fact that is stuck in my semantic memory, okay? Games like this, Trivial Pursuit, play on being able to test our semantic memory. I have a really good semantic memory. I have versions of Trivial Pursuit I've never been able to open because no one will play with me, because I will beat them senseless and feel nothing the entire time that I am beating them senseless. Okay. The last time I played Trivial Pursuit seriously, I was back in college. I remember we were a group of us were playing one night. We were playing the Disney version, and the Disney version of Trivial Pursuit had two separate sets of questions. There was the questions for the adults, and there was the questions for kids. The questions for the adults were obviously more difficult, and the questions for kids were supposed to be ones that the kids could get. By the end of the game, I was the only one on the adult questions. Everybody else was answering the kid questions because they could not answer the adult questions, like none of them. And the question that I won on, that I beat everybody, was a question about a movie I had never seen, but I got the answer right anyway, because I remember the commercial on TV for it. So that's how I won the game. And I remember they were so sure that I was going to get that one wrong. They're like, I've never heard of this one, so there's no chance that you've got this one. No way. And they asked me the question, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't seen this movie, but I think I remember it. I think it was The Rocketeer. And they kind of, yeah, right. How did you know that? I said, I remember the commercial. Yeah. 1930s guy with a rocket strapped to his back. How could you forget that? Okay. But the thing about semantic memory is that it's not something that's indelibly etched onto our brains. It is something that has to be rehearsed. It has to go over it again, because it can slip into forgetful. It can disappear out of our memory. It can be something that we used to remember, but we don't remember any longer. So semantic memory has to be worked on over and over and over again. Okay. Episodic memory, as a part of our long-term memory, are memories of our own life. This would include experiences that we've had, okay? Experiences that happened to us. Think of it as your own personal diary. If you remember your 12th birthday, or if you, seniors, you're going to start building a lot of these episodic memories for your life coming up really soon. They're going to be very different than previous years, senior classes, but you're still going to be building those episodic memories, the memory of graduation, the memory of going to college for the first time, or, whatever, getting a job and working that job and getting a paycheck. That's going to be an episodic memory that you're going to have. I remember my high school graduation very clearly. My high school graduation took place in a place where it didn't normally get held. My school district, remember, I grew up in Seattle. My school district would have their graduations at a place called the Seattle Arena, which is at the Seattle Center downtown. Just basically kind of a big indoor facility that they could stick all the graduates on the floor, and then all the parents sit in the stands around it, and we could have a graduation where everybody could be there, because you're not going to have it out on the football field because it rains and you're bound to have to move it inside. So you might as well just build it inside. So our high school graduation normally would have taken place at the Seattle Arena, but that year, 1999, somebody needed to have the entire Seattle Center, including the Seattle Arena. And so they called up the Seattle Center people and said, we're going to rent out the entire Seattle Center, but we need the arena too. And they're like, we can't give you the arena because we got a high school graduation going on there. And they've booked that, a decade ago. So that's not going to happen. And I don't know who it was, but this person said, what if can we talk to the school district and see if we can get them to go somewhere else? Because we really need to have the arena as a part of this. And they're like, you can try, good luck. And so they called up the school district and said, well, what would you need for you to give this up? And the school district said, well, we need to have at least this many seats, and it needs to be inside because it's a high school graduation. We don't want to have to move it inside, if it starts raining. And they're like, let me talk to some people. Well, the people that they talked to were the people who operated the Kingdome, which was where the Seahawks and the Mariners used to play. So it's a major league stadium, not just an arena. And they talked to them, and they're like, the Mariners are out of town that weekend, right? And they're like, yep. And they're like, great. Can we have a high school graduation there? We'll pay for it. And they're like, sure. So I got to graduate at the Kingdome. And I remember it very, very distinctly because we had to get on the buses. We had to ride all the way downtown for our graduation rehearsal. And my graduation rehearsal is very, very different than the graduation rehearsals that you guys have here at Palmdale. My graduation rehearsal was 15 minutes before graduation was supposed to start. And it was, okay, you all sit here and you sit here and there you go. And it wasn't like my high school was, super small. It was just, we didn't screw around and we wanted to get it over with. The reason that your graduation rehearsal is going to be a week long, if there is any, is because there's going to be some idiot who is not going to be paying attention when Mrs. Calvert says, all you have to do is pay attention and move when I tell you to move, and everything will be fine and we'll get this over with. But instead, they're going to screw around and you're going to have to start over again. Anyway, we had our practice graduation, and they sat us alphabetically that year. So we had to sit alphabetically. And I still remember the person that I was sitting next to. Her name was Jenny Mogg. I had some classes with her, whatever. So I knew her. And the other person I was supposed to sit next to, I had never seen before in my entire life. And he didn't end up showing up, probably because he didn't graduate. Anyway, so we all go back to put on our stupid blue robes and our stupid blue hat. And we all line up. And I remember I was in the front row of the second side. So there was two sides, and I was in the very front row of the second side because when your last name starts with an M, you're in the middle. Always. That fun time of the year when your elementary school teacher's like, okay, we're going to flip the line around. If you start with an A, you're in the back. And if you start with a Z, you're in the front. Well, M is still in the friggin' middle. Anyway, I remember sitting there. We get into our row. We sit down. And now, all the N through Z's are walking past us. And about every fifth or sixth person as they walk past is doing this as they walk past. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell are they doing? Because what the hell is going on here? And I remember I turned and I looked at Jenny and I said, why are people doing that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And without looking at me, she just mumbles to me, don't say anything, but I'm not wearing anything under my robe.
Oh my gosh!
I remember I go, what? She's like, stop looking at me. I'm like, sorry, I don't know where to put my eyes right now. And she's like, yeah. I said, why are you doing that? She's like, I thought it would be funny. I'm like, I think it's itchy because this thing is really cheap. And she's like, yeah, I figured that out. But yeah, I'm not wearing anything under my robe. I'm like, oh, well, that explains why creepers are trying to look up your graduation gown. And it wasn't like she was, leg up on the chair, showing everybody. She was just sitting there, playing. But there were people who were trying to look up her graduation gown. And I thought that was really funny. And that's something that I have remembered very, very distinctly. And it's a part of my episodic memory. Okay. I remember that graduation very, very well. They set the stage up over the pitcher's mound. And we sat in the infield of the baseball stadium, and we had our graduation at the Kingdome. It was pretty rad, I'm not going to lie. Another type of long-term memory is your declarative memory. And this holds your knowledge that has to be consciously called forth as it is needed. It is, what street you live on, and that 2 + 2 = 4. It's something that you don't have to necessarily think about, but it has, it. It's in there somewhere, but you have to go, 9 times 9 is 81. 81, 9 times 9. Got it. 81. You have to think about it. What and that. What street you live on. That 2 + 2 = 4. Charles Dickens. Yeah, no, sorry. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick. Another type of long-term memory is your procedural memory. And this is a skill that you learn that no longer requires conscious recollection in order to be able to do it. Without fail, at least once a year, I am asked by my students, or by a student who has to wear a tie for a presentation in their next class, do you know how to tie a tie? And the answer to that question is, yes, I know how to tie a tie. I am an adult. I know how to tie a tie. Well, how do you tie a tie? You tie it. You do that and it's a tie. Okay. I cannot for the life of me describe to you how to tie a tie. I know it goes around and the thing, and then you do that, and then it becomes a tie. I know how to do it, which is why if anybody ever asks me, how do you tie a tie? I say, give me the friggin' tie, and I tie it for them, and I loosen it up, and I get it off my head, and I put it around their neck, and I say, now don't untie that, because I don't know how to tell you how to tie a tie. I just know how to do it. Okay? Same thing with learning how to drive. If you are in the process of learning how to drive right now, you may be being taken out by your parents to, drive around town or something like that. They might be getting very angry at you because you're not driving properly or correctly or whatever. And they're just not telling you how to do it because they just do it automatically. It's part of their procedural memory. Okay. This is just something that we all kind of experience, is we all go through that. We overlearn a skill to the point where we can't tell you how to do it. How do you ride a bike? You put your right foot on this pedal and then you pedal. What happens if I fall off? Well, don't fall off, stupid. Okay. That is your procedural memory. They are skills that we have overlearned. And this also ties into our muscle memory. Now, we talked a little bit about muscle memory when we talked about your senses and we talked about your inner ear. And your muscle memory is basically relying on your overlearning of a set of complex motor skills to just happen automatically. Riding a bike, dancing, typing, hitting a baseball, things you don't have to consciously think about because the memory is in your muscles. It can do it automatically. If I'm sitting in front of a keyboard, I don't have to look at the keyboard to see where my fingers are to make sure that I'm typing it correctly. It just happens. Okay, same thing with people shooting free throws. Okay, you can overlearn that to the point where you just walk up to the line and you can hit free throws all day. Okay, you're relying on your muscle memory. You're not thinking about it anymore because you've overlearned it, and you have a very strong connection between your brain and your fingertips that you don't even need to use your brain anymore. It's just in your fingertips. Okay. So that's, yeah, you can build up your swimming muscle memory. I mean, do you consciously think, okay, and stroke, and stroke, and stroke? Or do you just go in there and start going? Because you can build up that muscle memory in that way as well. Everything can be practiced to the point where it's just automatic and you can't help but do it the right way. So, yeah. So that's where we're going to leave off for today, because that's where we got in the other classes, and that's where I wanted to leave or to stop. Okay. Right. Okay. I will put this